Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my NieR Automata very hard difficulty video walkthrough. That was me messing up this jump to get this item, which is full of components for upgrade. Not exactly precious, but decent enough to worth grabbing. And then we're going to be moving via using launchers to get enough height to cover these gaps. We're going to be moving back through the forest zone, and then we're going to be going towards the middle of the city, because we're about to get fast travel, which is wonderful, and it'd be really nice if 9S inherited the fast travel on the second campaign, but he doesn't. So you have to do everything you've seen us do up to this point again as him, with slight differences here and there, but nothing astronomical, before you can even get fast travel, which is a bit of a shame. There was a body to my left just then, but I don't think I saw it. I did see the chest across from me, so I'm going to try and do some glitch jumping to try and get something you don't have to glitch jump to do. But it's always nice to see these little moments happen. I'm a fan of messing with geometry to see how much I can get away with, and then completely dropping inputs and not doing the right thing. That wasn't the game, guys, that was me. You know how on my NieR playthrough I kept mentioning that the game was dropping inputs? Well, I'm using the same controller on this game and I have not dropped an input once. So if that doesn't tell you that it's the game that drops the inputs, I don't know what does. Because it's not an isolated incident to just me. Many people have tweeted at me that they've had dropped inputs as well, so it's definitely the game. And I don't know why, because that to me, how do you drop inputs in a game? Is it so easy to have that be left in? Because I would really like that to be removed. But come back towards this gate, you'll hear some dialogue between the robots, then the gate will open, and it's a shortcut into Pascal Village. We're going to go to Pascal Village, talk to him. He's going to give us some information on A2 because our bunker command are a little bit cloak and dagger with her. Apparently it's kind of classified, so we need to get the information from him. Then once we do that, we're going to be looking for a way to get something to happen, which I'm not going to spoil or ruin, but you will see when it happens, and then we can do that. So I've talked about the drops and the random nature of them, and the areas where you want to farm the drops to get certain items if they're there. I've talked about the combat and give you a general idea of it, talked about the pods, talked about the shortcomings in a lot of areas of the game. There are many more of those to be discussed, but I want to save them for if they occur, because as much as these issues need to be addressed, I can also appreciate that some people don't enjoy it when you address them. So I'm not going to edit myself for those folks, I'm just going to try and keep it as relevant to what you're seeing as possible. There are two shops here as well. You want to be very careful too, because if you accidentally attack, or do an attack to gain distance to increase movement, you can hit these people, and if you hit them too hard they will die. I don't know if they come back either, because I killed the merchant once by pressing the wrong button to open his shop. I don't know why I pressed square, but I did, and I ended up cracking him good, and it was an instant kill. So be careful. Another one of those interesting facets that they might have inherited from Dark Souls, or that they created themselves. But one thing I do want to talk about is the lock-on. So if you play this game on normal or below, the lock-on is L2, which is a button that does nothing on hard and very hard, because it doesn't exist. And it leads us to this communication of, do you think lock-on should ever be tied to difficulty? Because let's look at what lock-on does, right? Traditionally, lock-on is a system that exists to help the player aim. It exists to help the player see an enemy, and it exists to both take away camera management issues and pressures, and add an ease of use when it comes to guiding your attacks. Two of those things are incredibly powerful. Depending on the game, will depend on how much auto-aim your character has, and depending on how intensive the camera is needed to be moved, will depend on how much you're doing both of those things. And then when you combine the two in a single feature, you realise just how important it is. If anybody's... I know I'm mentioning Souls quite a lot, but it's this game's fucking fault for robbing so much tech, and robbing all the bad tech too, which I don't get at all. There's a transition for you guys. That was me probably going to the bunker, doing an objective in the bunker, something along the lines of finishing off or cashing in a side quest, maybe checking the shop or picking up some items, or just checking it for the sake of checking it, and then warping down to a different area. So we are now in the middle of the city ruins near the resistance camp, and we're going to be going, with the looks of this, towards the resistance camp. So just compensate for the edit and follow my path accordingly. But if anybody's tried to play a Souls game without using the lock-on, you will realise just how powerful the lock-on can be, but also just how much the lock-on can hinder certain interactions. And one of the more agreed upon playstyles is a combination of both. It's the idea of getting used to being able to do unlocked battle, but also using the lock-on when it treats you well. And I think that's a pretty smart thing to do, but I would recommend you get really good without the lock-on in those games, because it can save your ass when the lock-on fails you, and in fights where the camera fails because of the lock-on. So it's an important skill to have. Then when you put it into an action game like this, you can analyse from the perspective of a lot of action games have been getting rid of lock-ons. Some of them never had them to begin with. But they do have soft locks, but lock-ons are just not a feature that they use. Lock-on seems to be kind of something that is looked at as perhaps antiquated and of old-school design philosophy, and worth removing or ignoring. And I don't agree with it, but at the same time I think it's nice when they give you both options. I think Bayonetta did it best, and I think Bayonetta will probably always do it best. Because in Bayonetta there was a lock-on, but you didn't need to use it because you had the option to do commands instead that achieved the same purpose. The game had a very generous auto-lock, and you could guide attacks with the analog. The whole thing ran smoothly and was a perfect adaptation of having both your cake and eating it too, with both mechanics available to the player. Oh, something that's really important too, guys. After you've saved here, pop chips on that will give you a ranged damage bonus, because you're about to come into a very long shmup section that only has 1 or 2 checkpoints, and you have to do quite a lot of gameplay again. So remove everything that's not going to benefit you at this kind of battle, and keep on everything that will. So for me, I'm going to go with criticals, I'm going to go with range, and I'm going to remove some of the melee stuff, because the melee is not really used offensively for me in this sequence. It's used more defensively to sweep away the bullets. So just do what you can to milk extra damage, and just be aware that this next sequence, if you're not confident in the shmup aspects, can be very challenging. As I was saying though, lock-on, Bayonetta did it wonderfully, perfectly. I wish more games would adhere to that, where it can really, really be a benefit, or you can ignore it completely. This game has the same kind of soft lock that you can see in a game like Bayonetta, but in this game it gets you killed. And it gets you killed because when you put that mechanic and you marry it with another one, they don't make sweet music. When you put this idea of not having 100% control over where the girl attacks or where your character attacks, and you put that with an egregious overzealous softlock, you can hit the wrong thing at the worst possible time and lead to death. In a game where you die in one hit, it leads to hilarious moments, and also in a game where your counterattack gets naturally counterattacked by anything that lingers, you can end up countering one enemy, counterattack another enemy, and then get hit by a different enemy. And it all comes together to form just this moment of, I'm being punished for playing well. And whenever you get punished for playing well, it leads to a very interesting debate and a lot of frustration on the player's end. And the more you understand something, the more it hurts when it doesn't work. It's just one of those sad things. And speaking of sad things, there's a wonderfully shit camera angle coming up in this sequence. So there's a couple of androids here, or robots, or whatever these guys are. That's one of the crazy... he's like the Ed 209, only like a little bit more gentle looking, and a little bit more approachable. He's kind of like Bowser, a weird Bowser Ed 209 cute robot. And he's no threat really, because all of his moves are all directly like focused like that, and then you can get behind him and do massive damage when he's not looking. Another thing too, guys, you want to keep your chips on for this fight, because you're not going to be using your gun too much here, and you want to change it after this fight so that you get maximum efficiency between 2 encounters. I swapped a little bit early, and that was a mistake, but it's not a bad thing, because you can always compensate by playing better. But did you see that, guys? That was a counter-attack after a perfect evade, and it missed. Why can it miss? The whole point of a mechanic like that is that it lands, is that it gives you that benefit for doing something that isn't above the average approach to gameplay. The countering in this game and the dodging is not the most tight window, but it should still be rewarded. Then why does it fail so much? And the answer is simple: it doesn't work as well as it should have. And a lot of games have had this. Can you remember in Metal Gear Rising, where really, really rarely you would do a parry and it wouldn't land, it wouldn't connect, and you'd be absolutely gobsmacked because it happened so rarely? That's because it was designed really well, and there's always going to be that 1% chance that something fucks up, but it barely ever happened. It happened, I think, most on the geckos, because the geckos have a weird hitbox, so you could oftentimes do a perfect parry, and it wouldn't land on anything, because you'd be swinging between its legs or something, and those were the times where it happened a lot. But for everything else, it was usually spot on, because of how aggressive they were, how good the animation was, and how good those systems interacted with each other. Whereas in NieR, there are times when I would recommend that you don't even follow up after a perfect evade, because it puts you in more danger than it does a benefit, and what's the fucking point of it? If that's the case, it doesn't make sense to me how I would ever make a video telling you not to do the advanced counterattack technique because it could do more harm than good. And that... Can you think of a defense of that?
I think that's the last of the machines.
Because you know that they don't want you to be any kind of master of spacing, because this game has an egregious softlock that completely mitigates spacing, and half the attacks involve throwing the fucking sword. So spacing is neutralised by just the animations themselves. So the idea of controlling space and judging space for your attacks is an illusion, because the game has been designed so that all of that is essentially done for you. And half the perspectives take away the advantage of space anyway. So a spacing argument doesn't exist, even though there's definitely aspects of that in this game. To me, it seems like it wasn't given enough thought. And to say that, it seems really arrogant, doesn't it? And I hate the fact I'm saying it, but it's what it feels like. And now we enter shmup territory. So, right now I'm using missiles, which you can do, but you can change your pod to any of the other pods, should you choose to need them. I prefer the bullets all the time on the shmup sections, because they just seem to be more comfortable for my playstyle. On these particular angles, you can press square, and you don't have to worry about messing with the camera, because you don't have to aim. Don't forget that you can dodge in your craft, so make sure to use your dodges when you need them. They do make you invincible, but the window's quite small, so use it when you definitely need it. And look, right now, look at this, yeah? I'm in control here. Enemies could have turned up at any point just then, and they could have killed me quite easily because I wouldn't have had enough space or time to react to them. And that's not mentioning that in some of the angles you're going to see in this game, it changes how your stick interprets movement. So you'll notice on the previous angle, it was on a flat plane. We could go left, right, up, down. On this one, we go left, right, up, down. When you press those on your analog, that's what you get. But you know when it moves to these like Dutch tilts, off angles every so often that it gives you? It's not the same controls, and it limits your motion and where you can move. And I love the creativity of it, but there's a section in the boss fight coming up, the final angle of the boss fight, where they give you like 60% range of motion, and that's it. And unless you realise that your controls are not the same anymore, you're going to put yourself in a corner and all the bullets are going to find you and you're going to die. And guess what, guys? Very hard. One bullet, one kill. That's all it takes. And then you go back to the checkpoint, which is when we first got in the craft. Because the checkpoints here are kind of egregious. I think this might be the first one right now. I think this is the checkpoint. And then the next checkpoint is when you get on the gun, and that's it. You have to do it all again. And it's not so bad because it's a shmup section, so you expect it to be shmuppy. That's what shooting games do. It's the character action that I think suffers, because those games have never been like that, and the ones that were bad. But on this particular angle, when you move your analog, you get the direction you want. It's only on specific ones where it alters it a little bit, and I noticed it on stream when I was doing my first playthrough, because I was holding up, and I was firing at like 9 o'clock on the clock face, and that's not where I was holding the analog, and it was a weird disconnect until I realised the angle had changed how it interpreted the input. So be careful, folks. But the thing that I really like about these sequences is they don't seem to be at all related to pattern memorization. So, in a standard shooting game, high-level play can only really be achieved once you've memorised where the enemies come from, memorised where the best position is to start, to bait the bullets, to lure the bullets, to kill the enemy, to eradicate the bullets, and then so on. And all you do is remember the pattern, and then shepherd the bullets and shepherd the enemies, and then you win. I love shooting games, but my memory's crap. My short-term memory is atrocious, so the idea of complete pattern memorisation is something that I have a lot of difficulty with. I have to do something a lot before it goes in my brain, and when your game is only 30 minutes long, I have to play your game a lot to remember any of it. And at the moment in time, when I think of shmups, there's Death Smiles and there's Ikaruga are probably the only two shmups that I have in my mind as where I need to move through those games, because I played them a lot. Maybe Mushi Futari is another one, but that's it, because I don't have that good of a memory. So when it comes to pattern memorization, I like to react. So my favourite kind of shmups are the ones where you don't have to do that, where you can just kind of freestyle, and you can recover by having good hand-eye coordination and understanding how to dodge and everything. And most shmups on their harder levels and on their later levels, they don't really afford that unless you are incredibly good, and I'm not. So it gets to the point where you've kind of got to learn not to put yourself in bad places, or you've got to bomb. And I'm not a big fan of using bombs outside of practice runs. And in this, that's not the case. I've done this now 3 times on very hard, because you have to do it with 9S, and I ended up fucking up a save and having to do it again. So each time I did this, I did it differently. And that should give you great confidence, because it means that you don't have to be one of those crazy super play replay guys that do everything perfect and have invested millions of yen doing, credit runs to learn the patterns and high scores and things. You can just get on with it. And I think that's really fun, because the guy who wants to remember where everything is will do this effortlessly and have the best possible movement for all of it, and that's awesome for him. But the person like me who can't remember that shit unless I put a 10-month investment period into the game, I can just riff and have fun as well and still be successful. So I think this is a really great sequence, and I wish there was more of them. I just think it's a bit long, and I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it, to the accolade I gave it. But my issue with this, when I'm being super critical, is that this is like a 20 to 30 minute shmup section, and we haven't seen a shmup section since what, chapter 2? Since the Goliath fight, and that wasn't really a shmup section. It was just a boss fight, and it was kind of everything we've seen before. So there hasn't really been any kind of dedicated shmuppery at all for a long time. Why? This stuff is fun. It breaks up the gameplay. It's really interesting. I like it a lot. It would be nice if they weren't as long, but they were more frequent. I don't think you have to put all your eggs in the same basket. You can have a few baskets, and I think it would have made it feel better, because you would have been a bit more familiar with it, a bit more used to it, and it wouldn't feel like such a long slog. And it does feel long, guys. It's pretty long, and the checkpoint doesn't help this, but still, it's really fun. I like it a lot. But I suppose it could be the testament to the director, how he likes to keep shifting the perspective and the convention and what you're doing. This is the boss too. You're going to have to take this on, I think, 3 times, and after this, you'll have to do 2 in a row without a checkpoint, so be careful getting killed. Additionally, the missile barrage, I don't know why when I press the button it doesn't happen, so you'll notice when I do it, I stop firing, I stop moving, and I just mash L1, and it finally does it. But just realise, folks, I'm mashing L1 from the moment I'm firing, to stopping, to waiting, to doing it. I'm mashing it like a psychopath, and it just doesn't come out. I don't know why it takes so long. It must be some kind of balance conceit. But this is super simple stuff. Dodge the lasers, get off angle from the bullets, and just shoot the cars that are shooting at you. The only time this gets even remotely difficult is when they skew the perspective and your controls start working differently. It's kind of bullshit. The only other part of this that's difficult is what's coming up after this fight. So watch this. I died on this next bit. There's going to be a cutscene here where they talk to each other, and immediately it puts you back in the game, super close up, and an enemy spawns instantly. See that? If they spawn behind you, they shoot straight at you, and they can kill you before you've had a chance to move. And then you have to do all of that again since when I said you got that checkpoint. When it did the vignette like 5 to 6 minutes ago, and the boss fight all over again, and the flyer, I think, all over again. Like, you have to do quite a lot. And it's all because it gave us control, dropped an enemy in our face, and he just shit on our chest. And I don't think that's fair. There's a million ways I can critique this game, and I can point out areas that should have been better, but fundamentally, the issue that it has with a lot of the mechanics is they don't feel fair. When you get hit during a counterattack, it doesn't feel fair. When you get hit when something doesn't touch you, it doesn't feel fair. When they plonk you on a camera angle that you have to adjust to, and by the time you've adjusted, you've died, it doesn't feel fair. And that's the biggest sin of it. But once again, you'll not see this in any review, guys, because they all played on fucking baby mode. They all hoard items, baby moded it up, and just mashed one button. And I know it sounds incredibly, it sounds patronising and condescending towards those people, and I don't want it to sound that way, even though it obviously does. Because there's nothing wrong with having fun with a game. There's nothing wrong with playing on easy or normal. That's what they're there for. They're there to give you an easier time. But don't make a review then, kissing the game's ass and not mentioning any of the flaws just because you didn't see them because the game played itself. That to me is a gross oversight on some of the issues of the game. Because if you have to turn the difficulty down to enjoy a game, they've designed the difficulty badly, and inherently the game itself. And that's one of the arguments that I want to put forward with this. NieR is a great game, but there are aspects of it that are horrible, and nobody's talking about them. So that's why these videos and I'm going to have this commentary. It's not because I like to hear the sound of my own voice and I like to bitch and whine and just drag everybody down. I don't want to piss on your dreams. I don't want to mock your favourite game. But this is not a masterpiece. This is not perfect. People are saying it is, and those people should be committed. But right now, we're in the second shmup section. I've told you everything you need to know about the shmup section, really. All we're doing here is I'm holding shoot, I'm tapping square, and I'm moving the right analog to aim to where the enemies are. Because of our level being 20 and because of the chips that we have, we're killing things quite quickly. But as it progresses to this part of the phase, there's a few other extra threats. One of the threats is the laser beams that you saw. Those can touch you, so be careful of them. Another one is these missiles that will come, and they don't have the biggest fanfare. And you know, because the game looks really grey right now, the ocean looks grey, the clouds and the smokes look grey, everything kind of looks grey. Well, the missiles look grey as well. So they blend in super well, especially when there's all this shit kicking off. There's bits, there's debris, there's explosions, there's bullets. They can be tricky to see. And if they touch you, it's game over. So just kind of, you know, practice, get your eye used to it. If you've played shmups before, you're well aware that once you play them long enough, you start to see the matrix and it starts to slow down, it starts to make sense. You'll get there, guys, it's just a bit of practice. And then here is the first of the two core fights. And this is a different perspective too, you'll notice, but it still controls the same. It's the next one that's bad. So the bullets can be chopped, keep shooting them. I don't know what Pascal does in this fight. He kind of just hangs around not doing anything. And I don't know if it's because I've got him set to passive and I should have put him on aggressive, but my Pascal does nothing. No idea why. That was a waste of a missile barrage because there was no actual targets vulnerable just then. This laser will eventually start to sweep inward, so be careful of that. That can obviously get you killed. And then the core. You can be risky here and get close enough to the core so that your swords will swipe the bullets, but the bullets populate on the screen some distance away from the core itself, so they can actually spawn on top of your character. And if anything touches your character, you die. Because it's a shmup, straight up. But just be patient, you're completely safe here, keep slashing, keep shooting, and just appreciate that there is no checkpoints. If you die now, you'll have to do that again. So it pulls away, we come into the next phase of enemies, which is just a couple of standard spawns. The only threat here is getting point blank shotted, or them landing on you. Either of those things are obviously bad, and you're going to get punched by the big monster now, but it doesn't do any damage, it's preset. And then we get on to the next phase, which is a wave coming from below us. And in general shooting game logic, if an enemy starts coming from below for a certain period of time, the moment they stop, something will probably come from above, or from the side. There's usually a method to the madness of the spawns. So they've stopped now, and then they come from the top. So there's always a pattern to it, because that's what shooting games are. They're just a big pattern to be overcome. It's a puzzle through visual identity of where the problems is, where the window is, and how to fix it. So right now, two sweeping patterns from each side come into the middle and converge. Get rid of them. And then we've got one swooping into the middle, one swooping from the left. So get rid of the middle guys with some slashes to kill them all on the spawn, and then just kind of circle the screen and get rid of the stragglers. And then another two coming from each side and some coming from the bottom to mix it up. Don't get trapped, remember you have a dodge if you need it, and just kind of circle, bait those bullets, keep slashing to carve a path, and this is the end of the enemy sequence, and now we fight the second phase of the boss. So once again, folks, we're at an angle that is still kind of normal at the moment, and it's the exact same thing we did last time. There's going to be two of the globes are going to fire bullets, and the other two are going to fire lasers. I can't tell if this is the perspective where it feels like shit yet. I think it is. This might be it. But be careful of this. I do not slash here because I don't want to move at all, because I got hurt doing that once. But just be careful. I can't tell if this is it just yet, but it's coming up. Suffice to say, you are kind of restricted to 1/3 of the screen. It's not good at all. It's really awkward, and you'll get it when you play because you'll understand how it feels. Of course, if you're on a softer difficulty, you're not going to feel the sting of just how bad it can be. But if you're on hard and above, then you're gonna feel pain on this part if you have an experience like I did, because it just doesn't control right. It's really frustrating. But keep shooting. I suppose you could try and sit behind Pascal, maybe he'll block some bullets for you, but I wouldn't rely on that too much, because I don't trust this game at all. But I think this is the perspective where dodging becomes really awkward. But we're so close now to the end. Do you notice how I'm not shooting as it directly would be? It's because that's me holding like up and to the right and it's still going on a funny angle. Yeah, that's the weird perspective. It's hard to convey what it feels like though, you'll have to play. Because that's just the only way you're going to understand what I mean. The game has this thing for putting the perspective in interesting angles, and I love the idea of it, but I don't like how it affects the gameplay so overtly. There's a sequence coming up when we're in the factory where we have to kill a boss, and the camera's just doing what it wants. It's doing what it wants, you can't see the boss, you have to put yourself in really awkward positions to understand what the hell's happening, and then once you get control of the camera, it turns the lights off, so you couldn't even fucking see before because of the camera being a dick, and then when you can see, they turn the lights off. It's just... There are so many decisions in this game that make me bang my head against the wall and wonder who the fuck thought it was a good idea. And then you realise, probably the dude that made the first NieR, because the first NieR, let's be fair guys, from judging by the reviews and judging by the demo that I played, was not a very good game. But it was an interesting game that had a lot of charm, it had a lot of creativity, and it was very different to what is being offered at the time that it came out, and this garnered a lot of really passionate fans that were really interested in the game and the narrative and what have you, and were willing to put up with the shit because it was so damn interesting. And I'm not that guy, like I can do it, but at the same time I just don't think you should have to. I think it should have been made properly as a baseline before you would have even touched it, so then you would have liked what you were doing and been interested anyway. But such is the struggle, isn't it, of game design. There are plenty of games that have great ideas and are subpar and can be really enjoyed, and I think the first NieR is probably one of those that falls into that topic, and I think this one does in a lot of ways too, only it's mechanically better and more sound, but it's still inferior to its peers, and it's still inferior to half of Platinum's catalogue on a mechanical fundamental level. Like stylistically and with the combat and everything, it's easy to look at this and just be like, wow, this is awesome, this is like a sequel to Metal Gear Rising, or this is like a logical next step of Bayonetta. And I imagine a lot of people who haven't put that much time into those games, that's exactly what they're going to say. But the people who do dive deeper and do get deep into the mechanics and into the timings and into the minutiae and the metas of the game are going to realise that they couldn't be more wrong. And I hope that the patches work and fix things, and they've shown a proclivity towards fixing things. But even now, there are these weird inconsistencies with it. Like, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I hope I did. That one of the patches, right, gets rid of collision on the bodies on the ground from where people have died, you know, the bloodstains, during an Adam boss fight. And it's topical because we're going to fight him in this video. I believe it's coming up now. Or it should be, at least. But they didn't take it off everywhere else in the game. So that one fight has apparently been fixed, which I don't think it will have, because I don't trust them. The last time I did it, actually, I didn't see any bodies in that room, so maybe their fix was to literally remove the bodies, which is fucking hilarious, because that's not fixing the problem, that's just removing it and putting it somewhere else. Because if they'd have gone into the properties on the dead bodies and gone on the collision and turned it off, there would be no problem anywhere in the game, but they didn't do that. It seems like all they did was remove bodies from that fight, so everywhere else when you're running in the world shooting at somebody and your camera's tilted and you can't fucking see where you are, and all of a sudden you hit a brick wall and you die and you look down and it's a fucking body. Why should that exist? It's been patched, only it hasn't, because these people don't know what they're doing. Like, I don't get it. And I don't know who it is, so I'm not pointing fingers. All I'm saying is it's bad, and it should be better. The whole point of a patch is to make it better, so how the fuck do you fuck that up? Like, it costs to have patches done as well, so they paid money to essentially patch a cosmetic issue and leave a fundamental flaw in the game. It just baffles my mind. And I'm hoping, and I'm devoutly wishing, that when this game lands on the PAL side and the American side, that there's a bunch of tweaks to the game that get rid of a lot of the things I'm talking about, and it's just the Japanese version. I really do, because we deserve a better version of NieR Automata, and the game deserves it because it's great. But there's so many fucking holes. Like, if this was a fishing net, you would starve. It could be the best fishing net in the world, but you're still gonna starve. I don't get it. And I seem to be going after Emil here, so this is good. So you shoot him, and then you can buy stuff from him, but he sells seemingly random stuff, depending on what chapter you do this in, and it's all top tier, which means it's quite expensive. And I wanted, I think, to sell some stuff, and then I realised I didn't have much to sell, which is really unfortunate, but we didn't miss out, guys, because we're going to see him in a chapter coming up, and we're going to sell stuff in that chapter, which is then going to get us what we need, which is, of course, some of the level 6 chips. They're not the most optimised, so they take up a lot of space, but it's easier than making them yourself. And the whole point of this is to get you through with a nice easy path, and hopefully that's what this can be. Oh, folks, and I've made a mistake too. This is Chapter 7, Lost Child. The fight against Adam that takes place in the area where there used to be tons of bodies colliding everywhere is on Chapter 8. It's called the Copied City, so I've jumped the gun a little bit. But I wonder if I can show you a dodge on this enemy. Like, just then, that didn't touch me and I got a dodge off it, which is a nice example. I'm not too sure what I'm doing here. I might be trying to get like a quick machine drop to maybe get some money to buy something off him, but I think it's a bad idea. Because you never get the drops you want when you're trying for them. You always get them when you don't. So it's just kind of the sod's law of video games. But that shows Emil anyhow. He is a throwback to the original NieR, I believe. There's a few in this game. There's quite a lot of that for the fans, so I think that the people who like NieR are definitely going to get some interesting little insights that players that don't know it won't. But at the same time, I don't think you need to know anything about NieR or Drakengard to enjoy this game, which is definitely a strength of the game, because there's nothing worse than going into a completely undecipherable universe and not knowing who anybody is, and everybody else does. So they did well with that. But I think Devola and, is it Popola? I think they're from those games as well, so you'll recognise those. And I also think some of the items that you can do, like you can turn your pod into a book, and I think that's a direct reference to the first NieR. So there's quite a lot of interesting things for that, for the players that are interested. And I think that's awesome. I think that's a great way of doing it, because it's so easy to just go from the perspective that everybody understands something you understand, you know? It makes me think of sharks when I say at that point, because we all know what sharks are. They're this huge fish that fuck stuff up in the sea with massive teeth that Steven Spielberg made a scary movie about, right? Well, just because you know what a shark is doesn't know he knows what you look like. So the next time somebody gets bit, instead of thinking that sharks are out to kill humans because they're nasty bastards, just imagine what you would do if you're in the sea and you're hungry and you see something that looks something like what you want, but you're not quite sure what it is, so you just go over there and you give it a little nibble.